Hello.
Jamie, how are you?
Not too bad. And yourself?
Very good. Just to make sure that I've got everything set up so that it's simulcasting to you. Jamie, how are you?
Not too bad. And yourself?
Very good. Just to make sure that I've got everything set up so that it's simulcasting to you. Jamie, how are you?
Not too bad. And yourself?
Very good. Seems to have a nice sound. Just to make sure that I've got everything set up so that it's simulcasting to you. Jamie, how are you? Very good. I know why. Seems to have a nice sound. Okay, so I got it simulcasting to YouTube, and I'd also got volume on YouTube, which doesn't help.
That's one of sort of right.
So there we are.
I think my camera's on, but I can't see myself, so I don't know if I'm in shot or not.
You look stunning, mate.
Well, thank you very much.
So yeah, it's probably because I've got screen share on at the moment. So if I just stop share for a second,
right,
probably get a better view of yourself.
My head's missing. Right, okay. Is that better?
Looks good. Excellent. So life treating you well?
Yes, very busy at the moment, but you know, still got a job, so I can't complain.
Yeah. You might want to just rename yourself to Jamie Hassel rather than Nicole Hassel.
Any idea how?
Yeah, so in fact, I think I can rename you for you if you like. Shall I just do that?
Can you? As long as it's not rude.
There you go. So yeah, we'll just save it coming through on the recording and everyone's like, Nicole's got quite a deep voice.
This week, I want to be known as. Yes.
And my pronouns are she, her.
It. Yeah, whatever you want. It's tricky.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Right. I think everything's running all right.
Marvelous. Yeah, Jeremy makes his apologies. It's you might have seen in the news the smart motorway stuff has kicked off again.
And then Jeremy would sort of breeze in.
Yeah, so I missed some of that. You froze up.
Yeah, I was saying that I thought Richard had taken, all of the heat for that, and then Jeremy was just going to sort of breeze in, and it would all be lovely.
No. I mean, most of it sits with Max, but we obviously have a role to play in providing information. But why should facts get in the way of a good story? Did you see the coroner's comment about? There will be future deaths on smart motorways. Yeah. Frozen again.
I'm scared. I don't know why. My connection is normally rock solid.
I'm in the process of changing mine, so I'm hoping BT don't suddenly turn it off.
Mine's normally solid. I've got 3 full fibre. Right. Is that a bit better?
Not really.
Okay.
You're not as clear as you were before, and your picture keeps on freezing.
Okay.
I don't know if it's my end or.
I don't know. It's a bad moment.
I didn't. I got like every other word, part of word.
Yeah. Okay. Kills.
check my connection speed. So my download speed seems to be quite slow at the moment.
That's just you, Jamie.
Well, we've got somebody else in now. So welcome, Paul. How you doing?
Hello. Not too bad. Just to let you know, Dan, I had the same issue as Jamie. I could hear Jamie loud and clear.
Right.
But yourself was a bit like a Dalek. Every other word as well. Oh, can you hear me all right, Dan?
I can hear you, Paul.
Can you hear me, Jamie? Is it coming across all okay for you?
Yeah, I hear you perfectly clear, unfortunately.
I know. Same, vice versa, mate.
I'm just glad I can't see a picture of you at the moment, though.
It's only one finger, mate. Don't worry. And I'm glad this is being recorded. God, blimey. That's my career gone.
Just get in there. Anything you say or do is from you, not the police.
Yeah, that's why I thought you were going to tell me to caution you just for fun. Then you do not have to say anything. Oh, dear.
But anything stupid you do say will be used against you repeatedly.
Absolutely, repeatedly on Ditto, etc. The other thing is, Dan, I think you've got control. I know why, because obviously a face for radio, but I can't seem to get my video to work. Is that because you've disabled it?
So when you first came in, you wouldn't have had the power to do that. I've now promoted you to a co-host, so you should have the power to turn your camera on.
Okay, let me have a look.
So just use the button.
Yep, got it.
Yeah, perfect.
See that?
Okay.
That's me. Luckily, Dan, me and
Oh,
you.
no, turn it up.
Oh, Jamie, what can I say? That's it, mate. You eat the biscuits. Honestly, I want you to do that in the middle of the webinar. I'm going to ask you a question straight like that.
Great. And we've got David in as well. David, can you just switch your camera on? Is that okay?
I thought I had, but it said you turned me off.
Well, it's probably better that than me turning you on, David.
Well, that's much preferable, really. Virtually. Jamie, I saw you on LinkedIn last night. Goodness knows why, and I didn't recognise you at all. So from your LinkedIn photograph, but anyway.
I can't remember which one I used. So.
Yeah, it's probably just the quality on LinkedIn anyway. Anyway, I had a meeting with Jamie this morning, 8 o'clock. So.
Oh, Jeremy.
Jeremy, sorry, yes, yes, not Jamie. That's right, Jeremy, who said Jamie would be appearing. Yeah.
Okay, am I coming through fairly solidly now? Have my internet issues abated?
Yes, they have.
Yes.
Okay.
Clear.
Right. Okay. I'd obviously got a process running that it didn't like, and I've shut everything else down, and it seems to be fine now.
Yeah, it's called Jamie.
Okay, good. Right. Well, thank you guys for coming along and being part of this. As I think I've communicated to everyone, so we had originally got Antonio Avenoso from ETSC who was coming along. He's not available, but has ably been replaced by David. David's going to kind of give us, a bit of a sort of policy perspective from PACT-M, which I think is great. I mean, to be honest, David was my first thought, and then I thought actually it'd be really nice to bring in a different perspective as well and get a European view. So anyway, that's great. So yeah, we'll be starting in 4 minutes. There's actually a few attendees just starting to come in now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the holding slide on. and then I'll kick us off in 3 or 4 minutes. Okay.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, very good afternoon. It's 2 o'clock, so we are going to get underway with this afternoon's webinar. So thank you very much to everyone who's out there and joining us. We are on a couple of different platforms this afternoon, so you could be watching us on the roadsafety.network website. You could be watching us live streamed on YouTube, or you could be in the Zoom call with us. If you've got access to a variety of networks, the Zoom call is going to give you the more sort of the richer experience, because you'll be able to ask more questions directly to the panel that we've got lined up for you this afternoon. So if you do want to join us, there's an open link on the web page that you can now jump across to and join us here, which 30 or so of you have already managed to do, which is fantastic. And I understand that there are others who are watching the stream live online as well. So very warm welcome. For anyone who doesn't know me, my name's Dan Campsall. I am the company chairman at Agilysys, and I've worked in the whole road safety area for the best part of the last couple of decades. And it's my privilege this afternoon to chair us through this discussion. We've got a fantastic panel lined up for you. This is part of a series of webinars that we have been running over a number of months, over December and January, where we have been looking at some of the reports that have come out recently relating to road policing, and particularly looking at them through the lens of how data, evidence and evaluation are important in terms of shaping priorities, helping with operational tasking, helping us to really shape the work that we're doing. And what we thought would be great in order to finish this series off is to have a panel discussion about the future. So we've done quite a bit of looking back, and we've looked back to what some of the practices are and how a variety of partnerships and police forces are structuring their data analysis provision, how they're using research and evidence to inform their approaches. But what we thought would be useful to do as we draw this, the last in our winter webinar series together, is to really cast ahead and see what the future could hold, and are there ways in which we could do better. So in terms of context for this presentation, many of you will be familiar with the fact that there have been a couple of key reports that came out in the autumn. And so one of those was by HMICFRS. I never quite get those letters out in the right order. HMICFRS, Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services. And they took a look at roads policing, and from the forces that they interviewed and investigated, they found that actually there were a number of recommendations that they needed to make about strengthening roads policing. And some of those recommendations related to the quality of data analysis and evidence that was being used. That followed on the back of another great report from PACT. Roads policing and its contribution to road safety. The team at PACT looked at the role that roads policing plays and drew attention to the fact that actually it's a huge part of the road safety piece, and we don't deliver the impact in road safety terms if we don't have high quality intelligence-led policing as a part of the mix. So that those two reports really form the basis then of the webinar series that we've been delivering over the course of December and January. And it's part of an ongoing sort of view on what's going on in policing. So there's also, we've done with the Road Safety GB Analyst Network, a survey of police forces as well, looking at how they are responding to the data and analytical need. But then there are also other work streams going on within DFT at the moment. So they're currently reviewing the call for evidence for roads, part of the roads policing review. And they've also been taking a look at road safety partnerships with another work stream there. So there's a real spotlight on roads policing at the moment, and the ways in which roads policing can improve and develop after what has actually been quite a tough period for roads policing, where we've seen numbers cut and actually they're working really with their backs against the wall in some ways with the amount of resource that they've got available to them. But our job today is to look to the future, to the bright future and the opportunities that are there for us. So without further ado, I'm just going to stop sharing that screen, and I'm going to introduce the panel who are with me this afternoon. So I've got Jamie Hassell, David Davis and Paul Kesey. I think what would be great, gentlemen, is to start off is just to go round, and for anyone on this webinar who doesn't know you and your background, for you just to do an introduction and say a little about yourselves and your interest in this area. So Jamie, I'm going to come to you first.
Okay, I'm Jamie Hassell. I work for Highways England and have done for, I think, nearly 24 years now. I work in the road safety group for Jeremy, who unfortunately couldn't make it today. And I lead on sort of compliance and enforcement areas. So that's, you know, the part that I'm interested in. And also we do quite a lot of trialing sort of new technologies on the network and stuff. So we're doing stuff on close following on mobile phone detection at the moment.
Brilliant. David, let me come to you next.
Yes, I'm very pleased to be here. I can't claim any special knowledge of roads policing, but I've been involved with transport, road safety, various types for most of my career, if I can call it a career. Before being at I've been at PACT 8 years, and before that I was at the House Commons Transport Select Committee, where roads policing was absolutely one of the issues that they looked at there a number of times. And prior to that, I worked for the Audit Commission alongside Zoe Billingham, who is now at HMI CFRS. So that gets me some brownie points, perhaps.
Excellent. And Paul.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Detective Superintendent Paul Keasley. I suppose my day job is I'm the Director of Intelligence at Gloucestershire Constabulary. But my other job at a national level is I'm the NPCC National Road Policing Capability Lead for Operations and Intelligence. My day job involves I'm in charge of analyst and research, plus all elements of intel, both overt and covert. I suppose a couple of things. I used to be the commander in charge of Central Motorway Police Group, which was the largest road policing unit outside the Met per se. I have a real passion for road policing. I do it above and beyond my day role because I think it's so important. You know, I still struggle with the belief that 5 people die on our roads every day. And I think in this day and age, you know, part of the work that you've done, Dan, and all the colleagues who are on the call is the importance of that data insight to help drive that moving forward. One last point is I'm also currently the project lead on the road policing review. So I'm currently writing some proposals of how we're going to structure road policing moving forward for like the next 10 years, hopefully, for discussion at the full board.
Brilliant, thanks. So we got a brilliant range of expertise in this panel and insights that I'm sure will come out as we go through. But the value of these interactions is also to involve those of you who are participants watching this online. And we really do value you getting stuck in and involved as well. So the conversation will be all the richer if it's not left down to my ignorance in asking questions, but to really draw on your experience out there by firing in your questions. So if you're on the Zoom call, please use the Q&A feature that is in Zoom and do start getting your questions in. Don't leave it to the end and think, oh, I might ask that one a little bit later. Much better that you get your questions in as they arise, and we'll try and address those as we go through. But the way that I'm going to structure our conversation this afternoon, which will take us through till we'll get wrapped up by 3 o'clock, is to draw out some of the findings from the HMIC FRS report and just a number of other questions associated with that to ask us how we can move forward and how we can approach the future with and embrace the role that data and evidence can really bring to roads policing. And I'm aware that the panelists have, they've got their responsibilities and things. We're not here to sort of point any fingers at them or ask them to make commitments on behalf of their respective organisations, but actually just to talk about the issues and how we can move forward and do better. So please do engage with that conversation with us. So let me start, gents, with one of the findings that came out in the HMIC report, which said, often capability and capacity don't meet demand. The lack of analytical support means that enforcement activity is often unfocused and haphazard, and its effectiveness isn't evaluated. I guess we've all been around long enough to have seen various sorts of activities happen on our road networks that just have not had the evidence behind them. And what I was wondering is, sort of when you think about managing networks or about policing operations or about road safety policy, sort of what does good look like for you? How do you see data and evidence really sort of shaping our focus in delivering a safe road system? Anyone want to jump in and sort of just say, start with their view of what good looks like really, and the difference it makes when we've got good quality data and evidence driving our work?
Jamie, I'm happy to sort of kick off with some of the work we're doing. So we've started developing lead safety indicators because I think part of the issue is we have lots of data. It's not necessarily the right data, and we're not necessarily turning it into intelligence. So one of the first areas we're looking at is a lead indicator on speed, because that for our network, we have quite a bit of data, but not probably enough or the detailed that we really like. So, you know, and we don't, if you think of the Fatal 4, we don't have any real data on how many sort of drink and drug drivers are on our network, how many people are on mobile phones on our network, how many people don't have seatbelts on our network. There's been sort of spot surveys and stuff like that, but we don't really have what we'd really want. So, I mean, that's why we're now looking at sort of new technology to help us get that. So, you know, we need some baselines so that we can actually see where we are and which way it's heading, so that, you know, we can actually invest in tackling it to hopefully make improvements.
Right. I'm sure there will be plenty of highway authorities out there who look at you quite jealously, Jamie, and think, well, if you haven't got enough data, you should see what I'm working with. How do you see things are changing for you in Highways England? I mean, is data becoming a much more kind of cogent and coherent part of the work that you're engaged with?
Yeah, so as a company, we've got a new sort of data strategy where all the sort of databases we have that have all been sort of quite separate and independent, you know, when was a gully last cleaned and stuff like that, is very different to the state of a bridge. And the idea is that we're meant to bringing those all into one platform, that they all sort of match up and sort of map across to each other, so that we can actually start pulling out the intelligence about, you know, well, when was it last clean, you know, did flooding occur, stuff like this, that actually, you know, we can start almost hopefully predicting some things before they happen to take early intervention sort of thing. So I think we've still got quite a way to go, because there's a massive amount of data that sort of we have as a company on the asset that we want to get in there. But I also want to map across what drivers are doing on our network on that as well, sort of thing, you know, and what the weather might be doing and stuff like that, so that, you know, we hopefully have a much better picture of what's happening on our network at any point, and then what might happen because of that.
Yeah, you draw a really useful distinction there between information and insight. So it's all very well having all of that data sitting there somewhere, but until you can actually turn it into something which is actionable and provides you with insight on what's happening on your network, that's a big step forward. David, Paul, one of you want to come in with sort of your views on what good looks like?
I'd like to follow up really what Jamie is saying there. I mean, I think, you know, the road safety and probably, and I'm sure policing as well, policing profession, there are lots and lots of analysts and lots of data and lots of people doing some clever number crunching. I don't think in relation to preventing road casualties, we have been looking sufficiently at the right things. And Highways England talking about precursors there. I mean, if you look at the rail sector, where, you know, now the British railways have managed to reduce the number of deaths on the railways dramatically over the last 15 years. It's almost, you know, virtually no passenger now dies on the railways. So they're not monitoring deaths, because there are hardly any. They're monitoring accident precursors, as they call them. So it's things like signals past that danger, SPADs and so forth. And, you know, PACS published that report a couple of years ago, calling for safe system indicators, which we think, like, as Jamie says, exceeding the speed limit, levels of drink driving, seatbelt use, that sort of thing. And, you know, what it shows is our systems are not set up to measure those things in many cases. We have a seatbelt survey, which may be carried out every few years, you know, and it's based on a low speed road where somebody from TRL in a yellow jacket peers into the car. I don't mean to be rude about them, but it's crudely on that basis. And so I think that contrasts with some of the sort of huge, you know, levels of detail we go into looking at some of the, you know, the casualty and vulnerability and contributory factors and those sides. So I think we need to balance that up. And we published that report recently on what kills most of the roads, where we're trying to point to the danger side of it rather than just the vulnerability side of it.
Just on that, David, I mean, do you think we are lagging behind? I mean, I was just reflecting as you talk about monitoring seatbelt use. When I was out in Saudi Arabia last year, they are using CCTV footage. I mean, they're actually using it for enforcement purposes, but using CCTV footage combined with artificial intelligence to identify non-wearing. Now, even if you weren't willing to go as far as using it for an enforcement purpose, it would immediately tell you what your wearing rates were looking like, and you'd be able to monitor it in a much more active way. Do you think there are examples elsewhere where we really could be learning an awful lot by looking more widely than our historic practice, which, as you say, has been a little bit rudimentary for the data that we need?
I think that example you give is a very good one. And regardless of what's happening elsewhere, there are huge opportunities now technologically to put together really good quality video cameras, really good AI, really good communications, processing power, and so forth. And I think we've got to not let the enforcement side of it and the whole type approval process get in the way of using that for information, at least as a first point.
Yeah, great. Paul, did you want to come in to just sort of say a little bit about your thoughts from an operational perspective on what good looks like?
Yeah, to be honest, this might become a very boring panel because I think we're all going to agree. But the reality is, I'm very much in the camp of both David and Jamie regarding we shouldn't be looking at the aftermath. That is one of the elements that we should always learn a lesson, like an historian does. But what we should do is be preventing. We don't want people to suffer the tragedy of loss or serious life-changing injuries or even an accident, because be under no illusion, accidents themselves, even minor in nature, can affect people and how they drive in the future. Being a bit more careful and a bit more cautious can also be problematic on occasions. I think there is a saying, we're data rich but intelligence poor. No, I don't think this is about intelligence per se. Intelligence is just information that's been assessed and then obviously creates an intelligence product. This is about information gathering. This is about understanding how we use data. I think there's two bits that have caused some issues for policing in the past. One will probably surprise you. You'll often hear about evidence-based policing. I think that is the wrong title. I think we should be going to evidence-informed policing, because actually the based means often that we've already done it. We're going, actually, we should be constantly developing. And this is where, Dan, you talk about data insights. That is more powerful because you can get data, but actually understanding it is more problematic. I think there's a moment in time now, when we look at things like AI, robotics, etc., 10 years ago, it wouldn't have been the same type of ability to deliver against that. Cost would have prohibited us, the nature of understanding of it. Now that is totally changed. You look at certain off-the-shelf products such as Power BI and what that can actually produce. But when you look at AI in the real sense, the volume of data that we actually hold, for once now, we'll be able to analyze it because a human couldn't. If you take, and I appreciate this is from a crime point of view, but a good example, a normal mobile phone that we all probably hold contains over 1 million pages of A4 data. So if the links between a certain aspect was on page 8, 3022, 20,000, and then 200,000 or whatever, the human mind would not be able to hold that data set and make those links. A computer can do that in seconds if it's programmed accordingly. And we can all talk about the bias of programming, etc., but we've got to start making the leap into actually utilizing the data in the right way. Another couple of examples I will give you. There was a big uproar about 2.5 years ago in one of the newspapers' headlines that they ran a diagnostic on cancer research, and it showed that the AI program was 94% accurate. Roughly around about, sorry about that. The big headline was, oh my goodness, 6% is missed. What they'd missed was a surgeon, a human being, was something like 87% accurate. So we've got to understand there will always be elements that we need to accept that will be missed from an AI product. Dan, you mentioned about the CCTV in Saudi. For example, in Gloucestershire, our new cameras that we use camera enforcement for speed are also doing a seatbelt and mobile phone, because we deliberately invested to get the right technology to actually expand our understanding. My concerns are actually regarding seatbelts is more rear seat passengers, especially young children, and about how we capture that evidence. But I do think you're right. I think we've got to use technology far more to enhance our ability to A, understand the issue, B, take positive action, and C, which is a key element to me, is evaluation. And I think moving forward, we need to gain more access to vehicle telematics to understand that. But I understand that will cause some issues regarding privacy, international considerations, etc. But when I look at it from a proportional response, when I think 5 people die on our roads every day, I'm very much swayed. Any information that helps me reduce that, because ultimately, if we carry on doing what we always done, why would we expect that rate to go down?
Yeah.
Because people will tell you it's plateaued. I think David articulates it far better than I. That's not the case. When we talk about the actual level of serious accidents and all total of collisions, they plateaued years ago. Yeah. And this is the difference. We only just start to recognise it now.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thanks for that. It's slightly worrying. I'm in one of those sort of spy thriller novels at the moment, which is all about access to our intelligence. When I hear you talk, I feel myself conflicted, because it's like, oh yeah, Big Brother is watching you, but actually it is about how we use that data and intelligence, isn't it, in order to deliver outcomes for the benefit of society. And certainly with the work that some of my team have been doing using artificial neural networks and machine learning, the speed with which you can deal with huge and comprehensive data sets and start to drive insights from that is much, much more rapid.
So Dan, just sorry on that point, and it's a really important point, because this will be one of the hurdles we'll have to overcome to take the direction of travel for road safety into a different spectrum. And the reason I'm saying that is a really good example. Am I concerned? Of course I am. You like you say, you read a spy novel, you get the understanding. However, let's put this into a bit of context. 10 years ago, the vast majority of people didn't have online banking. Be very interested to know how many of the people on this call haven't got online banking, because the level of trust that we've now put into banking is at a level that actually it's really convenient. We want to understand our balances at the time and date now, not in 5 days' time. We want to maximize our interaction with our funding as much as possible, and we accept there is a risk that it could be compromised. But we've got to get to the level now where we accept the risk of that data being shared with the right safeguards for the right reasons.
It's a point I've been making for, I think, probably the last couple of years, is that as generations change as well. So, sort of my kids' generations, they think nothing of exchanging their details with Google, with Facebook, with Instagram and everyone else, because they do that in order to benefit from the service that's available to them by those providers. When I first started working in a safety camera partnership back in the early 2000s, speed enforcement was a contentious issue. This was front page on all of the tabloids, and I think a lot of the heat has gone out of that now, because I think the argument has largely been won in relation to the fact that actually we need to police the roads for the safety of all, and this isn't some terrible overplay by the state. Actually, it's necessary in order to for the safety of our local communities and for our children walking to school and all of those sorts of things. I'm going to jump across to a couple of different topics very shortly, but I'm actually, Paul, if I could just keep you going. Rob Gifford asked a question. He said, very few chief constables have made a reputation out of roads policing. How do we make it an attractive career promoting part of policing? And it struck me when I read his question as it came in, that a couple of years ago, apparently the sexiest job title that you could have was data scientist. So what we're talking about is joining roads policing and data science and making roads policing the sexiest part of policing. Do you think there is a transformational piece here about what roads policing is and how it fits with the whole intelligence piece?
I think it's a brilliant question by Rob. It's actually, without giving too much away, it's one of the main questions that we are seeking to be answered on the road policing review, or at least reference it accordingly. And the reason I say that is because he's 100% right. You know, I've got 27 years in the police. The vast majority of chief constables will be either have a crime background, i.e. CID, or would have been through what we call an operations background, which will be like firearms or public order or local policing. I would say very few would have a background over my career in relation to road policing. And I think partly that's because of the journey we've been on. You know, when I originally started in the job back in '94, it was very much traffic. It wasn't road policing, traffic. And although, you know, they did some, you know, I've got to say, they did brilliant work, but it was very much seen as, should we say, persecuting drivers, speeders, you know, kicking tires, looking at the con in use legislation. So what was the vehicle like? Rather than the new iteration of road policing, denying criminals use of the road and road safety. I think moving forward, we've got to change the rhetoric of road policing. It's about reducing harm on our network, reducing that element which incorporates all aspects of road safety, both from the environment through to safety of individuals and human beings. So Article 2 rights, it's got to be seen as much more of a, you know, you're making a key difference to the society that we live in. And I think through that, and hopefully through the work we are seeking to influence on the road policing review, we're going in that direction. And I think working as partnership will make it even more stronger, but it needs to be partnership in the strongest terms, not just a signature at the bottom of a page.
I'm going to come back to partnership in just a minute. That's actually where I want to go next. But first, I'm just going to bring in a couple of other questions relating to things that were raised by other panelists. So, David, you talked a bit about the importance of performance indicators. Actually, Jamie mentioned it as well. And Matt from Cambridgeshire, who's known well to many of us, said, what do you think the challenges are of introducing recommendations such as safety performance indicators, but at a local level, which I think is a challenge for some, is going beyond, you know, those as national indicators and being able to enact them at a local level. I don't know whether you want to speak to that for a moment.
I think it is a challenge because I think some indicators could be put together reasonably easily, such as speed compliance. It's not going to be perfect, but you know, you could do some monitoring, councils and police themselves do. I think other things like seatbelt wearing is difficult, but it could be done. And it's fascinating to hear what's happening in Gloucestershire from Paul and mobile phone use. So I think, you know, the data is not fully there yet, but it's not impossible. If we apply our minds to it, then I think it can be done. But I think the Department for Transport needs to give a lead. And one of the things PACS is or will be calling for is a national survey of drink and drug driving. Because at the moment, all we know is how many people get killed, or we think we know, we have data on that, you know, involving a driver over the limit, based on coroner data and so forth. We don't actually know how many people are out there at any one time, beyond the self-reported surveys, which may not be a bad thing, but we've never validated those. And so, yeah, you know, if the department gave a lead, then I think it'd be easier for local authorities to follow, local police as well.
Yeah, just following on from that. So there's a focus on sort of the authorities giving a lead, but Adrian Walsh has just raised an interesting point. He said, it's interesting how almost every successful transport business uses leading indicators to influence how they manage their drivers. Companies such as Masternaut or Geotab are well in advance of this. I'm just interested in that. I'd not really thought of it from the point of view of, you know, the lead indicators being used by industry as well, which are obviously major operators, major creators of traffic on our network. And ways in which actually we can engage fleet management and that side of things in order to have indicators there that are looking to manage risk. don't know whether you want to come in on that, Jamie, because obviously Highways England's done quite a lot of work on engaging with fleets as well.
Yeah, so I mean, driving for better business is a big area for us, and then some of the work we're doing with the detection stuff is actually we're then working with companies about sort of. So you know, we're writing to anyone that we sort of more than sort of once or twice close following, but what we're also doing is we're working with a number of sort of key partners shared their vehicle data. And then we're sort of sending back what their drivers are up to, so that the company can say, you know, look, you need to sort this out before you get, you know, caught by the police and stuff like that. You know, it's not on. And it also gives them some reassurance that, you know, 80–90% of their drivers are actually not doing a bad job, and it's only certain ones. And, you know, this comes back to, say, you know, like the gig economy and stuff like that. It's sometimes the not their actual drivers, it's the ones that they hire in temporarily and stuff like that, who are probably being paid not in the same way, and therefore they're more interested in getting somewhere, you know, faster to get the next job. You know, and a lot of it comes to, you know, how we pay people. You know, if we pay people for the speed they do something, yeah, guess what? They're going to try to do it as fast as they can, because they make, you know, they'll make more money like that. And it's trying to get companies to take ownership of that. That you know, if you're forcing someone, you know, you're giving them 20 deliveries to do in 20 minutes, and there's, you know, and even on a good day, it's a minute between each one. You know, they can't do it without really pushing, you know, the law and stuff like that. And, you know, and if they're then sacked if they don't achieve it and someone else is given the job, there's no, you know, development or learning sort of in there. So how we work with industry and making sure that they are not washing their hands of it and saying, well, you know, you know, the package is ours, but it's someone else delivers it. And it's sort of really trying to pull that out and, you know, sort of show the good examples and the bad examples, and, you know, ideally get companies to take the action themselves rather than having to legislate against them and things like that.
Yeah. Brilliant, thank you. David, just another question from Neil Gregg here, which keeps on with the subject of performance indicators. He raises the clash potentially between, you know, DFT and Home Office, etc. He says, is data collection not dictated by reporting on Home Office key performance indicators? These are then promoted by PCCs. Unless we can change the Home Office priorities, there may be little impetus for change. And I think that kind of cross-government piece sometimes does thwart us in really getting the change we want. I wonder whether you might want to just address that question.
I think I think actually there's a lot of information out there, all over, you know, dotted around. The department, to give them credit, have added questions into things like the Crime Survey England and Wales on compliance with drink driving and drug driving and those sort of things. But it's not easy to keep tabs on it all. And then, of course, there's all the Home Office police and crime data, which is collected for slightly different reasons, I think, but is also very valuable sometimes. So I'm hoping the Roads Policing Review will pull this all together, Paul, or somebody, because you know, I think we could start off by just amassing, you know, in one place, or making it easier to find stuff we've got, and then we could say, well, how could it be improved?
Yeah, sure. Okay, I'm going to move us on a bit.
Sorry, can I just add to David on that? So there's a piece of work that we've been doing now for a couple of years. So my vision is that we have what we call, it's not exactly a snappy title, but Joint National Road Intelligence Service. So something that is, you know, we do it once, but do it really well. So that data insight picture can be shared across all, in my case, 43 forces, but also could incorporate partnership data, local authorities, etc. Because the reality is, let's be under no illusion, data analytics can be expensive, but it's the return on investment that we need to concentrate on. And, you know, in reality, if we're saving lives, yes, I know there's a cost to that, but there's an emotional content as well. But I think it's more to do with how we can influence behavioural change, because ultimately you will not enforce your way out of anything to do with road policing or the road network. This is about everyone pulling together, whether it's the public, the motorist, the actual agencies who have responsibility for it, the enforcement side, the compliance, etc. But there is such a vast array of information that actually centrally owned but locally delivered is a model that I'm very much in favour of. because actually it also helps on the transparency element regarding how we're doing it. We're not doing it multiple different ways. We actually get processes agreed, etc. So building on what David's just said, as I've said before, we're rich in the information, but I think personally we're poor in how we arrive or derive the analysis and insight from that information.
That's maybe a subject that I come back to, because that was actually where I was probably going to end up, was questioning about delivering things at scale and whether actually we can deliver much better economies of scale by bringing some of this stuff into more managed processes that are delivered more centrally. But let me just take us on to the challenge of partnership, because at a couple of points people have talked about partnership. One of the findings in the HMIC FRS report said a lack of coordination hinders effective engagement with the public and partners. Police and partner agencies don't have a shared understanding about some road safety issues. This inhibits effective operational activity, both nationally and locally. There's also a lack of evaluation about what road safety activities work. And I mean, my background in road safety is partnership. I used to be involved in running an enforcement partnership in Thames Valley. And I just wondered what your views were on the ways in which, highway authorities and policing and stakeholders, the ways in which actually we can really make data and evidence the kind of common currency or the common vocabulary to bring people together around addressing some of these challenges. So I don't know who'd like to jump in there. I think, Jamie, you guys have done a lot of work on trying to sort of build partnerships and making data a kind of key asset of that. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it still comes down finding a partnership that is willing to work with us. And this comes back to, like you say, conflicting priorities and stuff like that. So, ours is around safety and congestion. The police is around the sort of safety and crime. And it's trying to sort of balance those out. Whereas if you think, congestion, the money involved in congestion is massive. And if you link road policing to congestion savings, it would probably pay for itself and make everyone very happy, sort of thing. So it's trying to pull that out. And I think it's the fact that we all have separate funding streams, but it's not quite as joined as it should be. And then there's not necessarily a clear map of what responsibilities we all have. So, enforcement is a good one that we always talk about, the sort of pyramid that, you've got to get the road design right first. You've got to make sure people know how to use it. You've got to give them some indicators when they're on the road of what they should be doing. And then the people that really, either aren't paying attention or don't care are the ones that you enforce against. And everyone else has had a chance to sort of, understand what's happening. And I think sometimes there's gaps that we miss. So we build a very good network, but we don't do the continuous and ongoing comms that sort of reminds people how to use them properly, and it's only the only comms we get then is when people get caught for doing 100 miles an hour on the road. And it's perhaps sort of not enough. And it's how we sort of say, look, this is what we want to achieve, and this is what everyone's got to do to achieve that. Yeah. And then, the last thing, how do we then sort the funding out that matches that? Is it who benefits the most funds it, or is it a central thing? Because actually, a lot of this, it benefits UK PLC. And it's, I think that's some of the mishmash that hopefully, some of the work of the Road Policing Review and bits and bobs like that will help sort of join up, is that actually individually they're not bad, they're just not glued together quite right.
That's an interesting challenge for us, isn't it? Is it an economic driver that enables us to, or sort of makes us concentrate in the right areas, or do we approach it from a kind of more structural point of view? And I think historically what we've done is we've kind of gone, well, actually this is a policy direction that we want to go in. And so we've created, enforcement partnerships or road safety partnerships and that sort of thing. And we've been led by the policy outcome. I think, Jamie's challenge is, okay, what's the benefit that gets everyone around the table? David, I don't know whether you want to sort of come in on that, because obviously you've got sort of that policy perspective, looking at, a whole range of policies that impact on road safety. how do we develop partnership that works? Have you got any thoughts on that?
No, I think it is really important, and perhaps even more broadly than partnerships. If we want society to take road safety seriously, so a chief police officer is incentivized to tackle those 5 deaths a day just as much as to tackle a knife crime. We've got to get a message across, and I think this is not just aimed at the police at all. This is aimed at the road safety community as much as anything, and the highways community and so forth. We've got to put it across. We've got to engage in other agendas. So we've got to show how it's relevant to climate change. So more so slightly slower or slower and more constant driving speeds are better for the environment. Less carbon emissions, less air pollution. If we want to promote active travel, which the government does, and there's huge public support for that, then we need to make sure that roads policing is sensitive to those vulnerable road users, and it's talking to them in the right ways. And in some quarters, even the term road safety is seen there's a bit of an old-fashioned, staid, conservative with a small c term, and road danger is what some of the public want tackling. People ring up because they say there's some idiot driving at speed through my village, and they're not. It's not actually necessarily worse. They might call it road safety, but it's dangerous to them, and close paths and that sort of stuff for cyclists and horse riders. So I think we've got to talk. We've got to work out other people's agendas and talk in language that appeals to the media, to the public, and so forth.
Great. Paul, I mean, you've obviously been working in a variety of sort of coalitions and partnerships within policing and with plenty of stakeholders as well. How do we get partnership working most effectively?
I'm afraid my experience has shown me it's invariably down to personalities, because of the way that partnerships are set up in UK PLC. That can work really well. If you get the right group of people together, you have not even a common vision. You have a vision that actually is about tackling, as David would say, the dangers on the road. Then actually you move forward very much. I'm a firm believer in not having groupthink. So I don't want everyone just to agree, but the principles of how we work and bring that variety of different areas that people can contribute to is really important. I think there's a couple of bits for me, just linking into what you said at the beginning, Dan. Economic and social. It's not just we talk about environmental, we talk about security, safety on the roads. We talk about it from a crime perspective, about how vehicles are used in the commission of criminal activity and use our road network. It's not an either or. It's a whole collection. And one of the issues we have is when we try and identify something that we can actually tackle, it polarizes the agenda item to that particular issue. Whereas actually it must be broader, and we must have, in my view, a wider concept of what we are actually discussing. Now, this is one of the areas that we're going to try and write new narrative, new language in relation to what we would at the moment know as partnership. Because one of the issues with that type of language is everyone has got a fixed idea in their mind what a road safety partnership is. Well, we've already talked about in the first section how AI technology and how we look at things in a different way. We've got to use different terminology. Otherwise, people will go, I know what that's about. That's a group of people who just, we invariably often try and force our way out of it. And I 100% don't believe in that. I think there's a role for it, but not, and I very much link in with what Jamie says, there is a pyramid, and enforcement is an element of it, but it shouldn't be the predominant one, because it's the easiest one to count. We know how many vehicles we stopped. We know what legislation we used. We know what happened, whether they went for driver improvement course, whether they went to court, whether they paid a fine. That's all very much the quantitative side. What we want is the qualitative, which links us back full circle to data insights. So to me, a really successful partnership moving forward will be actually understanding what their remit is and spending more time thinking about the questions they want answered rather than the answers and solutionising from the outset.
Great, thanks for that. Whilst you're going, Paul, let me ask you one of the perhaps slightly more provocative questions that have come in from the floor, but there've been a few. Wayne has asked, will better vehicles with enhanced safety systems ultimately do roads policing officers out of a job? I.e., actually talking about the ways in which we use technology, will technology make the difference? How do you see that?
Oh, I think that would be fantastic. I absolutely agree. So wouldn't it be great if the world didn't need a police service? Because we're all law abiding, we do the right things, as a society we get on. I see no difference in that point in relation to road policing. If I was in a position when we did our strategic assessment that there was no criminality caused where the roads were a element of it, or safety was at 0%, so that we've all hit that vision zero target consistently, and there's no role for it, that is absolutely success. Now, the reality is, I'm afraid it is unlikely to occur, definitely in my generation, and I suspect my children's. However, I do believe technology will play a key element of it. The downside with technology is people always try and find a way to get around it. So, for example, we restrict, scooters or electric bikes, and then suddenly somebody will de-restrict it, and that electric bike that could only do 20 miles an hour is suddenly capable of doing 50. So it's, there is a bit about human nature, and this is where, it will need to change from a behavioural change point of view, rather than enforcing your way out of it.
Let me just keep going on this sort of thread a little bit, because there's a couple of questions along these lines that have come in from members of the audience. So one from an anonymous attendee who said, speed enforcement is just so routine and well established. Should the police just be handing this over to outsourced providers, or let local authorities or Highways England get on with it the way that we've done with decriminalised parking, I suppose? It would free them up to police the roads more and to detect other more difficult issues such as mobile phone and drink driving. I guess it's another part of that kind of continuity of focusing more attention on doing the simple things that you can straightforwardly, and then allowing the police more time to focus on the complex.
I can see the benefit. I understand where the question's coming from, but let's go to data insight. So the insight will tell me that speed is a significant contributor to serious collisions. So if I want to make a significant difference, I need to actually impact on the speed levels. Now, there are reality. Together with Highways England, we've just done some study and some work which has come out with some fascinating results in relation to what different modes of policing can impact upon speeding levels on the strategic road network. That could be a police vehicle parked up at the side of the road. The impact on 2,000-3,000 vehicles over a distinct period of time can be significantly different to one vehicle pulling somebody over and dealing with them for a speeding offence. There's also, we've done some work again with Jamie and the team in relation to how it looks if we just put somebody on an overhanging bridge, etc. So this is the bit about insight and understanding it. I do think there are other avenues of working in true partnership, which the anonymous the person who raised the question has got a really good point. This is about us working in conjunction with our likes of our colleagues in Highways England or local authorities. But the legislation at the moment on speeding is the enforcement element of stopping a vehicle is down to the police. So, law would have to change, which it can do. But I think we'd have to make sure that we have the new system of working has to be validated to make sure it's better.
So I'm just going to move us forward a bit then. And one of the recommendations that came out in the HMIC FRS report, which I think is the one that probably most of us on this call are likely to have sort of homed in on to a certain extent, was recommendation 6, because that was about making sure that police forces had enough analytical capability They don't specify what enough is, so that's one little rabbit hole that we might sort of stray down. But actually, it was the final bullet point of that recommendation, which says that there is evaluation of road safety initiatives to establish their effectiveness that particularly I wanted to attend to. I think what Paul has just kind of highlighted to us is that actually we are starting to see more research going on into, if I do this, what is the effect on behaviour? And I think, historically, road safety has done an awful lot of activity on the basis of either hunch or, our anticipated effect or our instinct of what might happen. And I think, what the HMIC report is kind of pushing us towards is to be much more reflective and to evaluate more effectively the actions that we're taking, the interventions that we're implementing. Jamie, I'm going to kind of push to you, because I know that Highways England have obviously had, have been somewhat better resourced than the many highway authorities to be able to investigate in that way. What are some of the things where you're starting to really develop learning that could be transmissible to other parts of the network?
So I think the big one for us is that quite often an individual intervention is very hard to evaluate on its own, unless it is massive. It's really hard to prove it. And I think what we're now looking at, especially the work we did around the sort of Red X compliance, is actually you've got to look at a program of work. And if you can identify individual elements that you can evaluate, great. But actually it's more about the program of work that you put together, ideally, based on best evidence and stuff at the moment. But it's often about the whole package, because if you sort of say, well, I've sent these letters, did they work? I put a TV advert on the, the TV or stuff like that, did that work? You're not going to be able to detect it on itself. And quite often these things take time and build up. So I think that's the importance of actually thinking about programs of work and how they all fit together. That, if you go into schools and start, talking to children about road safety, it's how do you actually build and develop that? Because you might not easily be able to evaluate that on its own. But if there's a package of stuff that all sits together, how they link up, and you evaluate the package. Now, and you try to evaluate individual items, but I think it's the package, it's the programs of work, because it's like road policing. If you just say, well, road policing has or hasn't done this, well, actually, if it hasn't got the foundations underneath it, then it probably won't work anyhow. So, it's about looking at the whole intervention package and trying to get all the elements right at the right time, at the right scale, because that way, and then having the monitoring system in place to if we start looking at improving people using mobile phones, we need a system in place that knows how many people are on mobile phones. Because if you don't have that, you're never going to be able to say, we might be able to say, well, deaths have come down, but that'll be 2-3 years down the road. So you really need to know, what's happening and how all these things together as a package work. And I think that's the problem as an industry. We've tried to sort of say, I put this camera up, how well did it work? Rather than, a whole program together.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of a headline that I read in the, I think it was the Daily Mail, I have to confess to that, when I was running communications for Safety Camera Partnership. It goes back to, I think, one of the examples that Paul used earlier. It said something like 16% of speed cameras not working. It's like, brilliant. What about the 84% of speed cameras that are working? I mean, you've just identified, actually, there's a great measure out here that's really having an effect, but you've just chosen to focus on the bit of it that's failed.
And when they say not working, do they mean it's not enforcing, or that people aren't complying at them? Do you know what I mean? Because that.
Yeah. In this case, it was to do with casualty numbers having reduced. But what it was indicating was that actually 8 out of 10 times you stick a camera in, the casualties do reduce. So you've got to look at it on a wider area. And I think there's some good research, isn't there, that indicates there's coefficient effects between those measures that you put in and things like the communications that you use around it, etc. Brilliant. Paul, I didn't know whether you wanted to sort of come in on that as well, because I think, you know, research and evaluation is obviously something you've been kind of pushing quite hard.
Yeah, I think the big one for me is we need to spend more time at the beginning of any type of proof of concept, initiative, operation, to understand that first question that you asked, Dan, is what does good look like? What does success look like? You know, because actually we're very good at writing reports at the end, telling us what we often like to hear. I think the really good research sets out the stall, and sometimes it's not successful. You know, and you know, reality is we shouldn't be afraid of that, because it's always a success. Because even if it doesn't quite give us what we want, we understand it to a better degree. My personal view is, Einstein talks about if he had a problem to solve in an hour, he'd spend 59 minutes thinking about it and 1 hour solving it. And that is something that I'm really quite passionate about. I think we need to spend more time understanding, getting that, you know, I keep using the word, but insight, which can be driven by information, intelligence, but also there is an element, and I know you said it in a different way, Dan, and probably in a different context, but I am very much of a mind that professional judgment has also a part to play, because, you know, there are times when data will tell us one thing, but an officer's experience, a police staff, a member of the highway authority, a local, just knows. And sometimes machine learning at this moment in time, or AI, can't answer that question. So, for example, you know, this is a really obvious one, and you probably everybody on the call knows about it. But, you know, if I said son is to father as daughter is to, what is the answer? Well, the answer is mother. And that's really easy for us, because that's how we think. We think of the question, son is to father as daughter is to, well, it's mother. Okay. Computer wouldn't know that, because it hasn't been taught that. It can be shown and implemented and, you know, inputted, but we also have to be careful that sometimes the information it provides, you know, does need that professional judgment. I think the other two bits on that regarding professional judgment are, there will always be a role for human analysis to interpret data. This is what I see the data, AI, data, robotics, etc., machine learning, as enhancing the product that we give to analysts or researchers to use, so they're not spending their time doing things a computer can do quickly. So it is about interpretation, hypotheses, inferences, and we should spend more time disproving or proving those, rather than coming up and solutionizing. And to be honest, for the last few years, that has been my mantra. I'm not interested in solutionizing. I'm interested in understanding and then coming up, hopefully, with elements that will make it better moving forward.
Great. Guys, we are pretty much out of time, which is a shame, because I think we could keep this conversation probably going for at least another hour. I got plenty more questions that I'd like to ask, and there were certainly some questions that would have come in that it'd be good to spend some more time on. But you know, we've taken the time that we said we would allot for this. I did just want to point out that Brian's, I think, sided with the Daily Mail in his analysis. So Brian Lawton is agreeing with the Daily Mail. I'll just leave that out there, because that's a surprising finding from this afternoon. I'm just going to give an opportunity for Jamie, for David, and to Paul, just to sort of give any last reflections, and then I will draw our time together. So David, any sort of final reflections from you?
Yeah, I'd like to come back to your very opening point about the sunny the uplands ahead of us. You know, I think people have been calling for better roads policing, more roads police, all the rest of it for a long time. And I think the opportunity is there. You know, we've got Boris saying, I want 20,000 extra police officers. We've got the roads, the HMIC FRS report. We've got the call for evidence. And I think lots of things go in the right direction, plus all the technology opportunities. So I think we've got to seize it. We've got to really not miss this opportunity.
Great. Jamie?
I think mine is new sort of areas of data and intelligence. So, you know, I would encourage telematics companies to share more data with us and stuff like that. I know it's, you know, it's something they want to sell, but there's a massive benefit in using that. And, you know, the role companies have to play. You know, we know that very few people die at work now unless you're driving on the road. And that's a massive area that we want really companies to think about is, you know, you take all this precaution, you know, for people in factories and stuff, why not the same on the roads? So, you know, that's the one that we would really want to sort of get companies to think about.
Great. And Paul?
A couple of things. First off, I think the questions that have been posed in this webinar have been fantastic. I've noticed there's a number of questions. I think there's about 12 on a last look that have been raised. I'm more than happy, Dan, if you share those with me to provide responses either directly or through yourself in relation to it. I would also say that there's a linking with what David says. There is a moment in time. I've never known this in my career. I think there is a number of momentum being built regarding both the roads and transport agenda, because I think there's a realization of how it impacts on both social and economic aspects of our society. I think hopefully one of the biggest game changers, which I will manage as everyone's expectations, I'm not 100% sure will get included, but there is something called the strategic policing requirement that police forces have to have. Predominantly, there's currently 6 areas. That includes terrorism, serious organised crime, civil emergent contingencies, etc., child sexual exploitation. So it's the main issues that all forces have to have a specific responsibility. There's a real push for road policing to be included in part B, which is a capability element. If that happens, that is a game changer in my eyes about how that could impact upon how we view and that rhetoric and narrative regarding the whole roads agenda. But finally, without sounding awfully sycophantical, and you know I'm not really like that, Dan, I just think it's really great that Agilysys have pulled this together. You know, it's I'd be really interested in understanding a bit more about the previous webinars that you've run, because I definitely think the questions you're asking are the right ones, and I think they can make the most influence on the roads agenda moving forward.
Great, that's a lovely segue, Paul. Thanks very much, because I was just going to mention to anyone who's missed any of the webinars up until this point, they are all available to view. You just need to go to roadsafety.network, which is the home of the Road Safety GB Analyst Network, and you can view all of the content from the previous webinars there. The other thing that you can do whilst you're there is you can sign up for the Joining the Dots conference. So Joining the Dots has been the sort of annual get-together to discuss analytical issues relating to highways and safety over the last 6 years, I think. And unfortunately, given the constraints, we can't have a face-to-face meeting the way that we have done in previous years. In fact, our last one was just prior to lockdown in February last year. But on the 2nd and 3rd of March, we have got Joining the Dots taking place virtually. We've got the Roads Minister, Baroness Veer, is going to be speaking. David Davis, who's been with us this afternoon, will be there, as well as a spread of international and nationally recognised sort of speakers and contributors who are going to be shaping the content of that day. So please do check that out. It'd be great to have you along with us. It just remains for me to say thank you very much to Jamie, to David and to Paul for giving their time this afternoon. I think it has been a fascinating conversation. I very much enjoyed being able to be a part of it. And to the rest of you who participated, we will try and answer some of those outstanding questions. Thank you for your time, for your engagement and your interest in this area. Please do stay safe out there, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks very much, and bye for now.